Ja, hallo ihr Lieben. Good evening. This is the Equinox talk. And I was very excited to do this today. It was very spontaneous because I have a very special guest this evening, Ethan Minsker. And I just make this screen where you can also see him. That's Ethan. Ethan, too good to see you. It's quite a while that we haven't seen each other.
Reaching across the oceans and saying hello from New York City.
Yeah, I think it's really a pleasure on Equinox that we connect these two countries, Germany and the United States, especially as German people have been very focused on what's happening all the months over in the United States. But we came to the conclusion that we will not touch about that subject that everybody is talking about. We will focus on what we believe to be a very new start, because today is from the astrological level, it's today actually New Year's Day. So happy New Year to the world. As the sun enters into Aries, and we just met 2 years ago in Landsberg at the Snow Dance Independent Film Festival. And due to several reasons we all know about, this was postponed. So it starts today as well. So we just send lots of love and a very, very big hug to Landsberg. This is 2 years ago, where Ethan was the one, as the man in camo. That's what you see also with his suit. These are some impressions. I maybe let Ethan talk.
Yeah, it was. I made a feature documentary called Man in Camo, which is a documentary about how I relate to the world creatively and finding inspiration in the concept of what success is. So basically, it's like my life story put into an 80-minute film. It's a lot of like animation and crazy videos. The people describe it as kind of like a visual psychedelic trip, but I just put a lot of very heavily focused, handcrafted animation into the film. I'm sorry to say that I don't think it's really anywhere in Europe unless you go to like maybe Tubi or something like that, but it's mostly broadcast here in the United States on all of the channels, but you might be able to find it on Tubi or maybe YouTube movies or something like that, but I don't really know if that's true. Anyway, I submitted the film to a bunch of festivals and it played around the world. And one of the festivals that I submitted to was Snowdance. And any festival I got in, because this film is about me, I made an effort to go to. So I went to Germany and, took part of the festival. I'm not sure, like I'm showing a little clips of the festival. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but I make little videos of all the places I travel with my films. So yeah, I really love the festival. The people there are very kind and helpful. It's a beautiful little town. I definitely plan to submit again when I can actually travel, and I have a couple films in the works that I'm definitely going to be submitting to. And if I get in, I will, definitely show up there again and run around in the town. It's funny because it's like coming from New York City, you have this concept of what a beautiful like Bavarian town would be like, in Landsberg, where this is at, is like the epitome of like most beautiful German little, sort of town or city. I mean, I only went around kind of like the older part, so I don't really know all of it, but it's like you have this beautiful town, and then right above is this actual like castle, and you can walk up there and around and stuff. So yeah, I suggest to any filmmakers that happen to be watching this that it's a great place to go. They're very accommodating. They help promote your film. The actual town has shopkeepers that take a film and then they do artwork in their shop window related to that film, which is odd when you're, walking around the town as the filmmaker and you're like, hey, that's my film in a random, shop. So yeah, and that's where we met there. And you came up and hit me with your iPhone and interviewed me on the spot. And yeah, so that's, I guess, what we're continuing today.
Yeah. This is also, I also interviewed him, and I interviewed Lara, I interviewed Max, and so it's quite touching to see this, because I have been moving to Landsberg only in 2018 in November, and I was so excited then to discover that they have this film festival going on at the end of January 2019. And yeah, as you see, they all build up this chair of this director's chairs, and you see you can see all, yeah, that's Lara. And you can read up front what as you see it here, regarding the biographies of the directors and what the films are about. And so actually the cool thing is, it's also something Lena Odenthal told. The cool thing is that it takes just 5 minutes to get from one cinema to the other, from one screen to the other. I think this is unique normally if you have film festivals. I don't know, you have been to several.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times they keep them, it depends. Sometimes they're spread out, but what I found unique is, like, you'll be watching a movie and then you're walking down this cobble road and then over like a wooden bridge over like a beautiful little river with a thing. And then you're walking into like, a modern cinema house or one of the older traditional cinema houses, or, they take like a vacant, construction site, kind of like basically vacant room, and set up projectors in there. And all of them are, fun experiences, and the projection and sound and everything is good. I think because of Tom's background, the film festival director, he's a, big German, I guess he's kind of like what Dick Wolf would be here in the United States. He does like crime series and stuff like that. So his experience as a director, producer, and, dealing with screenings, he's very focused on the screenings looking good for the filmmakers, which, not a lot of festivals are like that. Sometimes you show up and it's not great video and not great audio. So yeah, it's nice to watch your film on a large screen for sure, in a nice, beautiful little theater. That's the river you pass as you're walking to the other cinema. That's the actual route that I took from one cinema to the other. If that makes sense. They also have a lot of good after parties and stuff. This is the walk that you go from the hill that leads up to the castle. So you have this kind of beautiful little winding path. But yeah, I enjoy it, and I hope to get invited back.
Yeah, it's really a beautiful little town, and Tom is in Germany. You have the most famous, more or less, crime series, you can call it, is always Sunday evening at 8:00 and 15 minutes is Tatort. So this crime scene, you would maybe translate it. Yeah, and this is tradition in Germany for many decades, so to say. And he did a lot of these Tatorts with Lena Odenthal. That's the name of the character. She's the criminal inspector. She's, I think, doing it already for at least, well, she's the first, more or less, who really does it in series. There were several starts with women being a female inspector, but she's the only one who really did it from now, I think, at least 15 years or something like that. So this is, Yeah, great.
Which you also see is a lot of the programming is very crime centered. So that's how another reflection of Tom and his work is that
Yeah.
there was a heavy like crime and punishment feel to a lot of the films that actually like were selected there.
Yeah.
And turning that off because.
So they start today, and actually I was there also last year, but the films were completely different, because when we met, there was a wide choice of films, also female directors, and last year it was all very, very dark films. Yeah. And
that's common. A lot of festivals kind of have a theme that they go with for a year, like that year's programming. So maybe that was like kind of the theme they were going for that year. So they try to slot a lot of films around kind of a general theme.
I don't know what the criteria was that they chose this film, but actually what I'm really interesting to understand now, I just was following what you were doing during the last years, and it's very exciting because it's so widespread and full of facets what you do. And when I saw this unicorn, I just going to change my screen. Let me just change it, because then we see it how it looks in a wider perspective. So I'm going to be in New York now with this background. I take this background, So, well, and this is the work I just like so much, because you have a whole series of animals, and how did you get this idea to design animals and then put it on the wall in the city?
Yeah, so I've been, I have a sketchbook. I'm going to turn off my thing. Let me see in my background. Blue, turn off my background real quick. So I do these like sketches in a sketchbook where I have like a lot of work where I have to do in the apartment where it's very physical, so I can't travel with it. And then I also like to have like a sketchbook that I can take with me. That's my daughter, Blue. Okay, you cannot see her. So I take a sketchbook, and it's my mobile artwork that I can do. And I think you can see it's like very thin lines. I do kind of like a pencil drawing first. And that's something I can take with me wherever, because like, I have a daughter, so I'm in the playground for a few hours. And instead of just sitting there looking at my iPhone, I will sketch out animals. So it's a variety of things, and unicorns were part of a series. So I do a whole variety of subjects. I try to do usually 7 at a time. So you can see there was like 7 unicorns, but I also do things like dead technologies. That's like a old cash machine. Here's another one of these. So this is just like Bristol board, and I'm using markers that I'll show in a second. But I do a thing of like hatch lines and little like stippling marks. Right. So I was doing that for over the course of a year, and I'll play a little video. I'll show this screen share as I talk. Let me see, where is that? Here we go. Is that showing up for you?
Yeah.
So I took the sketchbooks and I Xeroxed them on a large scale Xerox, blew them up to whatever sizes I want, usually pretty big. And then I repaint and draw on top of that. So I'm using this black and white sketch because it's cheaper, and then I'm adding color to it. And then I make each one unique by adding those colors to it. This one here is a figure I made. I was obsessed with trying to make this 3-dimensional character, like a space ghost type thing. And then I print that out, and then I wheat paste that up around. And then I realized I could change the face. So some were like a gorilla in a spacesuit, and some were like a skull. And anyway, in New York City at this time, we were on a heavy lockdown, and there was a lot of like, political issues going on with race and police shootings and all of this stuff. And, you know, it's just like a tough time to be in the city. And a lot of people were leaving and a lot of people weren't going out. So the city was kind of like a vacant ghost town with a lot of very negative, angry artwork, which politically, you know, I'm all for it and all that stuff. But personally, and these are like related to my man in camo, I also made some that promoted the film where I had these large scans of myself and I printed those out. But I felt like when I was walking around, for me personally, I wanted to see more, you know, animals and more wildlife brought back to a city, because the city's kind of vacant. And when the city's vacant, you think animals and nature will take back over. And so I started putting these up and people started reacting so positively to it that I was like, well, I'm going to just keep doing it, because I like the concept of, you know, walking around and out of your corner of your eye, you might see a raccoon digging and foraging in the trash by some trash cans. So it wasn't just like placing an animal, it was placing them in the appropriate place. You know, like people who are walking dogs, I found there's a lot of people who walk dogs and they were taking pictures of themselves, or sorry, with the dog, with the wheat paste of the dog right behind them. So I really like this concept of animals, you know, sort of reconnecting with their selfies. And this video here is for a different project, which is somewhat related to the time period, but it's called I Love You, New York, But You're Bringing Me Down, which is based on a song, the LCD Sound System song, which the lyrics of the song kind of say how like people love New York, but you know, it's like this thing of like, I love the old New York. That's a constant thing that people say in the city. I love the old New York. And what that means is like, you have this concept of New York being better in a time in the past, but it's never as good as it is right, you know, back then. Like right now, it's not as good. A few years ago, it was better. I love the old New York. So I made this whole city based out of recycled materials. You know, cardboard boxes were being sent to the house. We were doing a lot of shipping. I felt bad about putting that back out into the environment. So I was taking these boxes and rebuilding them into a fictional city, the city that I kind of like envision into my head and my memory. And then because other people were isolated, I said, hey, you know what? Take a photo of yourself as if you're walking down the street, and take a photo of yourself as if you're sitting on a subway platform, and send that to me. And then I took those photos and then I cut them out and then I put them into the cityscape, so that then I could send those photos back to people of themselves in a crowded New York City that didn't exist at the time. And it built this kind of like web connection of people, you know, all over the world sending in these photos of themselves and then seeing themselves in this New York City in a crowded subway, you know. And these are not just dioramas that I'm building. These have like full lights, they have moving parts, they have parts that buzz when you touch them. And I basically just recreated not just city blocks and buildings, but whole sort of universes with inside the building. So you'll see later on that like, if you look inside of a window, you'll see kind of like this vision inside of what that is. Because, you know, when you walk around New York or any city, I do this thing where I'm like looking in a building going like, I wonder what it's like inside that building. I can see in the window and I'm curious. So I built entire worlds inside, like floors with, you know, apartments that have all these crazy things in it, that if I ever get a chance to actually show this art, that people will walk around the artwork, look into the windows and find whole sceneries inside the windows. So this is, you know, showing like that was showing some of the recycled materials in the cars. And some of these trucks and cars that I made, I would find, you know, trucks in the city that are covered in graffiti, and I'd photograph it and then I'd rebuild the trucks with the graffiti that I found on the streets. So yeah, and then there's me in the camo suit again, of course, because that's my you know, my representation of who I am as an artist, is that I feel that it's almost like the amount of work and effort you have to put in to do something creative, whether it's a film or a piece of artwork or a book, you have to put on your suit of armor and be ready to go to war, because it's like that sort of struggle. It's incredibly difficult. It takes a lot of effort, and you have to have a will that is strong, because anything you put out there, people are going to attack you on.
Yeah.
Some are going to love you on it, but you're also going to have like a few that attack you. So this is almost like me in my superhero's costume. So anytime I do an event, whether it's an interview or showing up for a screening, I wear this camo suit. I don't do it for other people's screenings because I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. But for my events, I show up in this suit. And the suits themselves I had made, and as I was traveling through Asia, you could bring, they'll make a suit for you like within a day or two for a couple of $100.
Yeah.
And the quality is good. So for years if I travel through Asia, I bring the camouflage with me, and I have them tailor and build the suit then. And these things also come with, like, I don't know if you can see it, like with a little silencer and a pistol on the inside that says Antagonist Movement, which is the art group that I founded in 2000. These are all things that are covered in the film Man in Camo that, unless you search for it, would be hard to find. So this is like the trucks that I, graffiti trucks that I copied in the city, because I feel like there's this iconic imagery of New York City. It's water towers, it's like graffiti, it's like lots of windows and crowded streets. And so, yeah, that's what I replicated for this project. I'll let it just keep playing. Am I talking too much, or is this good?
No, this is just so fascinating. And I just what I was wondering the whole time is, of course, this needs a lot of space. So is there a exhibition where people can see it, or are you just doing it for your videos and your films? Or is it because you said people send in their photographs and then you resend them the pictures, what you created out of their photographs? But is there a gallery or some place where it can also be seen? As you said, also the interior of the buildings, people can, just like this dollhouses, have a look at it. But where can they see it?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that. And I'll explain this part because it's on the video, is that, I have a kid and a wife in a small New York apartment, and I basically filled the entire apartment up with these giant buildings, and I ran out of space and made my wife furious. So my mom has a spare room, and we basically me took that hand truck and took every piece over to my mother's house and filled this entire room from floor to ceiling with art. And it's still like, there's still more going. Like you can see in here, it's just like packed full of these buildings that I built, and the water towers and the train, the subway trains and stuff. So yeah, I've been moving it over there. This here is a mask that goes on my head for the actual final show. But the show itself, a friend of mine, Ted Reederer, used to be the director for a gallery here in New York City. And he had come up with the concept of the show. There's a giant diorama over in the Queens Museum of Art, which is a replica of the entire Manhattan 5 boroughs with lots of tiny buildings. And it's this cool thing that they're always updating. And what Ted said is, why don't you build an entire, cityscape the way you do out of like, paper mache and stuff. So I reconstructed this entire city, and then the gallery and everything happened where it's all closed down, and they hadn't given me a date. So I don't think that show is actually happening now. So I'm currently going to work on, I have to photograph all the artwork and have these people do a write-up and then submit to galleries. So right now, the place I was going to show it, it's not clear that that'll happen. So I'm currently looking for another place. And in the meantime, I have my mother's house filled with these buildings, and my apartment is still, you know, pretty much getting filled with buildings too. So now it's showing like some of the other stuff. It's like I do a lot of like paper mache process, and you can see I build an Under Armour of cardboard using whatever boxes come in. Sometimes it's shipping boxes, sometimes it's cereal boxes, and I build sort of like a skeleton. And then I take white paper or whatever paper that comes in. This is from a book that someone had me read, and I wheat paste over the skeleton, and then I paint on top of that. So I was fixated on foxes at the time because I feel like, you know, my spirit animal would be actually something like a fox or a polar bear, something mixed between the two. And foxes are like something that are very crafty, and they're beautiful animals, and they're, you know, intelligent, and they're also hunted. So I feel kind of like a kinship with those. And then, sorry, so that kind of explains, those are the two questions,
so
right?
they are
Where's
the
the art show?
unicorns. Great.
Yeah. Yeah, the unicorns again are a part of the thing of like, you know, I was doing the buildings and I was doing the animals, wheat pasting, and then I decided to focus on unicorns because, you know, right now we all need a little bit of magic in our lives. So unicorns are like an animal, but they're also like this magical being. And instead of just doing a normal unicorn, I would come up with concepts. Like one was the thornicorn. So it had like a thorny unicorn.
Yeah.
And then, you know, one where it's like the unicorn thing would be snapped because, you know, sometimes like deer and stuff, you see like the reindeer horns get snapped off, right? And then, you know, maybe there would be like a double corn where it's like some of them have two. So I kind of made my version of unicorns in this universe of all different types of unicorns. Now this is me building a battleship.
I just would like to
Fleet.
concentrate more on the animal sort of thing, because it's always so fascinating. We could just watch the video for ages, because it's so great. But let us just get super, because I just downloaded some of the pics, but here it's much better to be seen how you. This is also some sort of recycling, I think, for a lot of people that order stuff in boxes. But,
I just think you don't need to like just throw it out. I mean, in New York City we have recycling, but the truth is that because in the United States recycling existed because China used to buy a lot of our recycled material. Now China produces its own recycled material and no longer purchases from the United States. So there's no real buyers for recycled material. So material is not really being recycled, even if you have recycling bins here in the United States. So you can think you feel good by putting it in the landfill, but the truth, you know, by putting it in the recycling bin, but the truth is there's really no place for it to go because there's no market. So to change that, either you have to consistently buy things that are recycled, which most people don't do, but there needs to be more of that. Or, you know, you could do things like figure out how to make, you know, reuse that recycled material. I always say that, like, there's a thing I learned when I went to actually Germany, when I did an art show in Berlin in 2008 with these German artists that art collectives work together, is that when you go there, you notice that the trash bins are very, very small, right? Incredibly small. Like in New York, it's like something like that, where in New York, you could fit 2 people inside of them, right? On every corner. And in Germany and Berlin, when you're walking around, you see one not very, very often. They're very far apart. And then when you're getting breakfast or something like that, there's everything came in like milk was in a glass bottle, water was in a glass bottle. Most things that my friend purchased were things that didn't come in wrappers. So I think that the thing here in the United States is that we focus too much on wrapping and packaging everything. Where in Europe, you can go to a market and get pretty much everything without a wrapper, you know, and they just wrap it up in like wax paper or something. That's a very small, you know, thing to the environment.
And I also think I was just once in the United States, and this was in the 90s, and you know, this was in California, And what just for me, for example, I enjoy food and having nice glasses, nice dishes, plates, and this whole fast food thing, or what you love, that you go to in a, just like Landsberg, you know, that you go into a bistro, a little coffee, a restaurant, and you have all this sort of cozy old stuff. Just referring to what you said, we like the old New York, yeah. What you, I like this, what you see in films when they are downtown, and you mostly when you're German or in Europe, you always see these streets with the, yeah, just like in You Got Mail, you know, where Meg Ryan is living, always these apartments with the windows, or you have these other brickstone houses with the leathers. And this is so this romantic sort of, let me say, Woody Allen sort of New York also, you know. And it's this wrapping everything up and producing a lot of waste. This is, I think, what I also relate to the United States, because you have so much space there, while we in Germany,
I always try to say to people is that when people talk to me about recycling, I'm like, you're talking about a system after the fact. So you don't start with recycling, you start with not having packaging.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, don't purchase clothing that is only worn once or twice. You know, like, this is a suit I've worn many, many, many times. I have basically 2 suits. I wear them all the time for events.
Mm.
You know, my clothing I never throw out. I get harassed about it all the time by my wife. But basically, don't purchase things that you're not going to use over and over again, and avoid things that are heavily packaged. So if you can reduce the amount of materials that you're having to put in the trash, then you don't really have to worry about recycling. Do you know what I mean? Like, I get really upset with that. I'm like, if you're going to like put all this effort into recycling and pushing the concept of recycling, why are you not instead pushing the concept of anti-packaging? Like, let's have no packaging.
Yeah.
You know, give people those options. Then there's no garbage.
Yeah.
And another point I wanted to say, when you're saying that kind of romantic view of New York, that's also part of my art project is, you know, the I love you, New York, but you're bringing me down, is that all of the buildings have these old, you know, walk up kind of like the old windows, and that's like the vision of New York that I remember. But currently, if you walked around my neighborhood now, you would see a lot of these glass buildings going up, where it's like, you know, I noticed that in Berlin when I was doing this art project in the neighborhood of Wedding, just like kind of like a Turkish neighborhood.
Wedding.
You know, that used to be, I guess, West Berlin. No, right? Yeah.
I think
East
it
Berlin.
once
So it was like,
has been East Germany Wedding. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, like under the communist or whatever. But so they had these beautiful old buildings, right, that were being torn down, and then they were replacing them with these awful glass buildings. And I said to my friends, and I'm like, this is terrible, because that building looks exactly like any other building that goes up in New York or in LA, or it has nothing unique about it. It's a glass shell and those are also recycled buildings. Like, none of those buildings usually last more than 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Right? Where an old walk-up is 100 to 200 years old.
Yeah.
You know, in the United States. Like, my building that I live in right now was built in 1929. So it's getting on to be about 100 years old.
Yeah.
Sorry, but that was kind of parts of the finer details of that.
How many hours do you sleep?
I have to try to sleep I try to sleep on average about 7 hours.
Oh.
I try like 7, or if I can do 8, you know, like today I got like a good 8 hours. Right now they're doing construction above me in the apartment above me, so kind of messed up. But yeah, I very much do focus on my sleep, because it's like, I have this thing where when I'm going to sleep or when I'm waking up, this meditative state where I come up with a lot of my projects, but also getting enough sleep is better for your longevity, your health, keep your spirits up. So I do focus on trying to get as much sleep as possible. But what you're implying is that I do a lot of projects, and how do I have time?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Because we, for those people who are watching now, it's I contacted you in the night last week, Saturday night to Monday, Sunday night to Monday night, you know, and had came up with this idea, and we didn't have much time to communicate because you're also working during the week. So what's your work? Is the art your work? You're constantly working on this project, or do you have a different sort of work that you're doing as well during the week?
yeah, during the week, and not every week, because I'm called like I'm a vendor, which means like I'm freelance here in New York. So it's not like a permanent job. It's based on projects, but I'm a video editor for broadcast and cable television. So I basically do these promos or ads for a TV show that, you know, like it's like whatever the show is, every episode, I'm doing these little ads that talk about what you will see next on that next episode. So this week I'm working on a show for the next 4 weeks, and that's usually like, you know, I work from like 10 in the morning till 6 at night. But again, it's like this kind of work. It's like I'm sending out an edit to my producers, and then there's a lag time of about 40 minutes before I get notes back. Where most people who do this kind of job, what they'll do is they'll surf the internet or, you know, do something else or watch TV or something. What I do is I'll like hop on one of my films and I'll basically edit one of the documentaries or work on animation for a documentary. So it's kind of like I have a dedicated window of like between 6 and 8, I'm doing work, but I'm also like fine tuning one of the 2 feature films I'm working on. And then when I get off of work, you know, instead of like I'll put on the news or something, but then I'll work on like the physical artwork, like the drawings or the sculptural things and that sort of thing. And then on the weekends, when I'm away from the computer, then I'm in the parks sketching with my daughter, you know, while she's playing. So yeah, I believe there's this thing that you have to, every day I try to at least have a solid 2 hours of what I do creatively. And I call that kind of like my creative exercise. So if like, you know, if I go outside, which I try to do every day, and jump rope for like 30 minutes or something and do some, you know, exercises in the apartment, you also have to have like this creative exercise that you do every day. And if you do like at least 2 hours on whatever it is, then over a long period of time, that builds up to be a large body of like work.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, yes, I make films. I also do scripts, and I write fanzines, and I make street art, and I do physical, you know, sort of gallery centered art. And I'm a father, and I have a full-time job. But it's like, I just don't want to spend a lot of time, you know, watching television. My television time is kind of like broken up until like after 8 o'clock, or actually after 9 o'clock. Once I get my daughter to sleep, you know, I'll watch like a movie or something for a couple of hours. But the rest of the time, I'm not going to squander it, you know, and waste it on looking at, you know, searching the internet or all that kind of stuff. That makes
Because
sense.
there are a lot, I think there are a lot of people that normally wonder how, I hear quite often people say, oh, I don't have time for this, you know. But if you have a closer look at what they are using for what they are using their time, this is most of the time they really just, yeah, from my point of view, they waste it. And if I think, for example, if you want to have quality of life, and it's also due to now having a lockdown, you know, people are forced to stay at home. And I think for some, in German we say sometimes, be careful what you wish for, because it might come true. And if I just think of people saying, oh, I have so little time with my partner because he or she's working so much. I would like to work at home just as you do, for people like me working at home. But now they get all their wishes, so to say. But I have the impression that for a lot of people, it's a problem, because actually myself, I'm not suffering from lockdown, because more or less I live a very similar life anyway, just being by myself, creating stuff, and the day is always short for it. Actually, I normally sleep only 4 hours. I think I'm a bit older than you are. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 52.
You're 52. Oh, okay. But I'm still older. I become 57 now.
Well, you don't look
Yeah, I know.
57.
This is, I think but this is the thing. There are people, when you meet people, they are 20 and they look like an old man. They're already children sometimes who look like bank directors and they need just a cigar and they could go into a Capone film, so it's just, but I think it's sometimes I ask myself, when people are just blending out that there is death, and death and fear is a real issue for a lot of people now, I think. But if you have a closer look at how they use their lifetime regarding quality of life, so far they have always wasted it, at least a big part of it. What do you think about that?
Well, I'd say, like, I think for quality of life is a few things, is that I try to get enough sleep. I try to get exercise. I try to eat right. I try not to get too much direct sunlight. So I have this beautiful skin and complexion and stuff.
We do.
But also it's like, I'm always, like my film Man in Camo talks about this a lot, is that the premise of the film is kind of like the fear of death, right? So like there's this void of, like, for me, I feel like when you die, theoretically there's like energy is never created and destroyed. So you'd think that like whatever you are in your being, is dispersed out into the universe and becomes something else. But that something else is a new form. So it would not be me in this consistency, in this thought pattern. So my fear of death is always present in what I'm doing creatively. And what I do creatively, is to try to, focus on something that is living, but at the same time, leaving something beyond my shelf life, beyond this carbon-based life form, that by making something is kind of like a memorial to myself that others can interact with after I'm gone. So it's like a lot of my personal artwork, whether it's like a book, like I've written a couple of books and films where it kind of focuses on my experience and trying to relate that to others. Not all my work, a lot of the other work is focused on other artists. So it's kind of like, while you're here on this limited time, what are you going to do with this, with yourself during this time? So for me, I derive a lot of pleasure out of doing things creatively. And that's why I do a lot of things creatively, because I enjoy it. So I don't want to give this impression that it's like, I'm so scared of death that I have to just keep creating because I want somebody to remember me. Because the reality is, in the span of existence, none of this stuff will be remembered by anybody. Your iconic Jesus, your, Mussolini, your D'Angelo, like, whatever the greatest artists are or thinkers of the time, in the span of existence will be forgotten too, and myself included. But in the meantime, I derive pleasure from it, so I will keep doing it. There's a thing during lockdown here where, there was like 3 months where I just had no work and I wasn't doing anything. And a lot of artists were out there like, stuck at home and not doing anything. And to me, I'm like, every one of you people told me that if I just had more time to focus on what I do creatively. So the moment I was at home, I was like, fine. I started working on all these projects and I got a lot of stuff done. And I think on the other side of this, then I'll have like, you know, where people are saying like it was an entire year wasted. I'm like, it was an entire year of you know, getting stuff done for me. It was like an entire year of focused, dedicated work on what I wanted to do creatively. All the dreams and hopes that I had obsessed about for years. And like, if I could just do it, I've accomplished it. I wrote a script. I have 2 feature documentaries that I'm getting close to done. I have an entire city that I built out of recycled material. I hit the street with wheat paste. At the same time, I've been doing a lot of like these interviews, and you can see some of this on like my Facebook page or YouTube. I do a show called Infinite Spaghetti, which I'm interviewing cosplayers and like creative like people in the, you know, sci-fi universe. And there's a lot of people who will say like they haven't done anything, and it's just because they were so paralyzed, you know, and depressed. And that's absolutely acceptable. I completely concur. I completely agree. And everybody's got to just do what they can to make it through whatever your situation is, not even just now, whatever it is. And I'm just saying, for me personally, if I didn't focus on that, I know on the other side of this whole thing, I'd be looking back going, I wasted time. And time is the most, absolutely most precious commodity that I have, because I'm very aware that there's not a lot of time left. I'm 52. I'm lucky I'll make it to 80. That's, you know, what, 28 years? That's not a lot of time. In 28 years, I've done a ton. So, you know, for me, this is how I deal and cope, and it's kept me mentally stable, you know. So I'm just putting it out there that this is an option for people, but it's not the only option. It's, you got to do what you can to survive. I'm going to share my Instagram page, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, all your pages. But, you know, when we talked in Landsberg, okay, yeah.
What did I just do?
Yeah, when we talked in Landsberg, we can also put this then below the video and the YouTube, your websites and everything, you know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to show more images as we talk.
I just see that I need a bit of electric current for my notebook. I had loaded it up. Yeah, but I think, you know, you are very quick in processing what people say and follow this. I think most people have a problem in watching pictures and just wait. And listening at the same time. So maybe we could just focus again on the talk, because I have another question regarding what you said in Landsberg. You said because we now have the switch. Yesterday, a sun changed from Pisces to Aries. You know, so Pisces is a very spiritual energy. It's also related with art, and I think you Virgo from your zodiac.
Yep, Virgo.
Yeah, Virgo. So Virgo is just the 100% opposition sign of Pisces. You know, so very structured, very organized. Always try to optimize things. But on the other hand, it always depends, because I have Virgo in my, let's say, how the people perceive me in the outside world. But when I'm private, I'm very much in peace, in my Pisces mood, when I just draw back, live almost like in a monastery and focus on my stuff, create things and no music on, just to hear myself think and get pictures and so on. And you said in Landsberg, you need to create, and you need art, because otherwise this is a way how you cope with your inner demons. So this is the dark Scorpio side, because I always talk about our shadow world, the shadow world I have to confront inside myself. And I think you know it also very well, especially as when people see you now, what you do, how you create, how you work with technical stuff and so on. They certainly will not think how the life started with you as a child, because you had a lot of issues to cope with that normal people wouldn't think that you overcome this so well that you are now what you are now and doing what you're now doing. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
So, I mean, this is also like a big part of Man in Camo.
Yeah.
I got to preference that I talk about it in that. And also in my books, like Rich Boy Cries for Mama and Barstool Prophets. These are two like books that are on Amazon. But I grew up in Washington, D.C., and a very political city. My parents were both lawyers. My father worked for presidents and stuff. At a very early age, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, a learning disability. So when they tested me, I had a problem connecting for symbols and codes. So like reading, writing, and math. I was had a deficit in, I was very bad at, but understanding complex theories of understanding, stringing things together and making connections, I excelled in. So that meant like I had to go to a special school, and I was picked on by a lot of other kids for going to that special school. And because of the dyslexia, I gravitated towards things that were more for individuals. So like the punk rock music scene, which was very big in Washington, D.C. So I got into a lot of like that, and I surrounded myself with friends that were from that community. And as I got older, that community became very violent. So, in Washington, I had about maybe 9 or 10 friends that were murdered. Some committed suicide, some died of overdose. And, there's a thing that I learned that's like when I left DC to go to New York City in 1988 to go to art school, I realized this thing, meeting other kids from other places, other college students, is that me and the kids from DC, it wasn't just me, it was like everyone I knew from DC, whether I knew them or not, if I met them at school, they had the same experiences, because in Washington, it's a very small city. It's a 10 by 10 mile square. And when the crack epidemic hit Washington, there was a lot of violence. So it had the highest murder rate per capita of the world. So more people anywhere in the world were dying in Washington in that time during the 80s than anywhere else. During Beirut, during Belfast, in the middle of the IRA thing, like it was the most dangerous city in the world to live in that time period. So it's something that meant it was unescapable if you grew up there. It's a small city, everybody knows everybody. If there are people who die, it affects 30 or 40 other people around you. And if so many other people are dying, it's a large ring of people being affected. So the other kids from DC all had the same thinking of me, like, we're not going to live long, be prepared. Somebody is going to like walk up behind you and shoot you. When I would sit in a restaurant, my eyes were always on the door, my back was always against the wall. And when I hear other people saying that, they don't really get it. It's like, that's survival. That's how if somebody is going to walk in and get you, you are prepared to fight. And the other kids in college did not have that experience. They were like, didn't know anybody who had died, whether it was from murder, suicide, or whatever else. Like they just had these, like, to me, it was like this perfect charmed life. And how could that be possible? Because, I had known like at least 10 people who died. And even now, today at this age, I still have friends that are from that community who die and pass away and stuff like that. So, from that, I realize it's like post-traumatic stress disorder. That's not just for soldiers that happen, in war. that's also for people who live in communities where there's a lot of like murder and death around you. So when I talk to kids who are from tough neighborhoods, you know, it's almost like the tip of the iceberg. When you hear like a kid lives from a community where there's a lot of violence, it's not like they know one person who died, they know multiple people who died. And it's that thing of having it over and over and over again that builds up this thing of you where you know, it's like life has little value. You're lucky to have every day that you can. And how are you going to deal with these issues? You know, so for me, it's like, you know, I put this in my film. It's like I wanted to show the repetitive nature. It's like this person died, this person died, this person died. How, you know, how it's not one, it's a bunch. And in my books, I write, it's not one person dying, it's a few people dying. Because you see in films and stuff, it's like, oh, one person died. It's like, that's not how it is in a community. Multiple people are dying around you. And at a certain point, it becomes like, you know, commonplace. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, that person died. Sorry. But the way that affects you as a human is this post-traumatic stress disorder. So for me, artwork was a way to overcome that. So I could have become, you know, and I did. There was a long period where I was extremely violent, you know, where I reacted to the violent world by trying to protect myself by being violent. And this is in one of my books in Rich Boy Cries for Mama that I talk about. When I moved to New York, I had this party and I threw these guys out because they were giving my roommate a hard time. And basically they came back at the end of the party with a bunch of their friends to start a fight. So for me, these were attackers that were going to kill me. So I pulled out a machete I had and I hacked these guys with a machete and sent, like, you know, one of them to the hospital, who was a football player. I ruined his career, but I attacked him with a machete and I tried to murder this guy. There's blood all over the apartment. And these guys were college kids from Columbia University, and their friend who knew them called me up and was like, what are you, a maniac? And I'm like, you tell that person, if I find him, I'm going to still come after him. I'm going to kill him. So then all those guys just disappeared. But for me, it's like, it's not like I was trying to be a tough guy. It's not like I was trying to express violence. That's not the goal. This thing was self-preservation. I was scared. And the more you would back me into a corner, the more I would explode violently forward to protect myself. So all of those sort of things, that was just one thing. I'm lucky that I never killed somebody. I'm lucky that I never ended up in jail. I'm lucky that my family is lawyers and that have, you know, gathered around to protect me. These are the advantages I had where a lot of other people did not have. And I fully recognize that. And I know that's not fair, but this is the truth. So instead of going forward and trying to continue with like this thing of being totally scared, which I'm still scared, and I felt like if somebody was threatening me or my family, the reaction would be the same. But what I do is try to remove myself from those environments. You know, I'm not hanging out at the punk rock shows. I'm not going to any of the places where I feel that this would be commonplace. I'm not staying out late at night. I don't drink. I don't use drugs. You know, so
Have you ever?
Yeah, no, I was a period in high school where I drank a lot and I was a bartender, but I really didn't drink or use drugs during that time. It was a very short period in high school that I experimented with it. But I feel like, you know, there's almost like these statistical anomalies that happen. Like if you're using a lot of drugs, you're more apt to violence. If you're drinking, more violence. If you're putting yourself in these like situations and locations. So I removed myself from all that. And then I focused on artwork to try to heal myself, you know, to try to keep the darkness at bay, to try to keep the fear of death that's ever present, the dark void that's always chasing you, keep that at bay. So I feel like the process is that I came from a dark place and that I'm not ever going to be over it. I'm going to continuously battle it. And I battle that with my suit of armor and creating art and trying to put something out there that's positive in the world, not just for myself, but for a community of artists that I work with.
You
That answer the question?
Yeah. And you said another thing which I consider to be very important, and actually I think there are a lot of parallels in a certain sense regarding you and me. Of course, I didn't have a childhood like this, but you can listen very intensely. And on the other hand, you can, of course, when there's so much going on in your brain and you so many thoughts, so many experiences, so much what you had in your life that would fill, for other people it would be 20 lives or 100 lives that you had in your one life already, and you made something out of it. And you said there's always someone who will criticize you, and I think a lot of people have the problem, and especially now as discussions are, you couldn't even call it, at least in Germany, polarized. It's just especially in Germany, as I'm a karma astrologer, I've already for several years before we had 2020, I said, a lot of colleagues, of course, did this because you can see it in astrology. We said there will be, economics will break down 2020, and we have cycles repeating themselves like we had when Hitler came up. We have the cycles returning when we had the time of industrialization, but now it's digitalization. We will have this economic crisis again, though it really was hardly very difficult to imagine how could this happen worldwide. Of course, you have the stock markets and so on, but you always have in mind that it's economics and that more or less rules the world. And this lobbying, what you find in parliaments, that the politicians just take the decisions the way they take it. And now it's very difficult to do what at least I'm doing in Germany, especially also for someone who's doing a spiritual work, that you really say what you think. I say what I think in my videos, and most people, and I can also be quite, I'm not talking about around, I'm not beating around the bush. I just say what I think. And this is very difficult in Germany because people are just so much afraid. And I'm not wearing a mask. I'm freed from that due to medical reasons. Because last year, I just, when this started, I get panic attacks when I can't breathe, or because I'm extremely sensitive, which means for my daily routine that I just leave the house. Well, last time I was shopping is at the beginning of the month, and I just buy my stuff that I can eat and I have. And I always do it anti-cyclic, that I meet very little people, because people can get quite aggressive when they see that you're not wearing a mask. But I have been healthy and well for the last 10 years since I'm self-employed. So this is a really crazy world, and it reminds me of a nightmare that I had as a teenager, because I was dreaming till my mid-20s. I always had every night nightmares already since I was a kid, and I was always attacked by dark forces, and I always tried to protect myself with my hands and the energies in my hands, just like a superhero. And I was always dreaming that I was freeing people from dungeons, freeing them that have been tortured, and people tried to stab me and kill me. And so I had a very terrible dream that a whole army of zombies were invading the country, and they were trying to take prisoners, everybody as a prisoner, or make them slaves and subdue them. And they were taking the women and made them their slaves as well, and violate them, And it was so horrible. And I just tried to free the people. also from dungeons. And then at a certain degree, I just realized they are always, they had horses, and I had no chance on a long-term period, so to say, to escape being caught. Yeah. And I just thought they would catch me, then I at least try to choose my zombie that I have to stay with them myself. And I just remember there was one scene, I was in a white room that reminded me of where we had the showers in the when I was a kid, when you went swimming in the swimming hall, where you had the showers in the women's changing rooms, and all white tiles, and they were just cleaning me, and it was this hygienic stuff was so present, and it was so horrible that I still remember this dream. And for me, when I realized exactly 1 year ago, it also was the 20th of March, that I had started in Landsberg again to have my first 2 days coaching, which I call the karma resolution. It's just with one person. And exactly at that day, we had this restriction started that we no longer were allowed to move as freely as we wanted. We had to be at home at a certain time. And so I knew this whole horror scenario will start now. And for me, it's very much what comes true now, or has become true now. But on the other hand, I just don't want to be drawn into this energy, you know? I just stayed at home. I just focused on my what I was doing, and I also had my whole life left behind that I had led before. In 2018, we had split up, my partner and me. We had been living in a house together. We just moved out, and I moved out without having a new home. I wanted just to experience how this is, because my grandparents during World War II, they were living in East Prussia. So when there was the war, they had to become refugees. They had to leave everything behind. And this is always something that was part of my family history. And I just thought, as I've been always going into my dark side and my shadow world, to end this family story and to come up on a new level, I now do this last step, that they had to flee. I go on free will. They had to leave everything behind, and I just gave it away to the social services, charity, and so on. And I just kept the stuff I could store in a professional store, 8 square meters. And then I just started a new life. And so last year, then I just thought, I'm now at the point where I get back on a certain level, and then Corona happened, But for me, this last year was also some sort of freeing myself, because I'm no longer living in Bavaria, Germany. For those people watching this, and in Germany, in Bavaria, this is very right-wing, very, we would say, Republican in the United States. So it's also, Landsberg is also the city where Hitler wrote his book, My Fight. He wrote what he was planning to do, but he was sitting in the prison in Landsberg and wrote this. And Landsberg is surrounded by 9 parts that belong to Dachau as a concentration camp, and the prisoners were held there. So where I moved in the house, it was about a kilometer just from distance. There was one of these concentration camp things, and in the woods there were 2,000 people buried in a mass grave. So if you have this very strong feeling that I have, I've always been in this sort of shadow world, in this darkness, and at the same time, I always go into this when moon goes in Scorpio, but I'm not afraid, you know. I just decided then last year, I know from astrology, that in July I will be in a new home without knowing where this home is going to be. And it really happened. I'm now here in another part of Germany that's more open-minded, but now it's difficult everywhere. And the one who owns the apartment I'm living in here was actually my last client before I moved out from of the house where I had been living with my ex-partner. And he was my last client before I moved out. And so when I was looking for a new home, when in June last year, when things were opening again, I went did a Andra on tour, and I was traveling around to find a new home. And I also did live videos. I'm looking for a new home, and then he wrote, "Okay, I have something where you could move in." You know, but this is I always believe that I have everything inside myself to find a new to get into something new. And for me, it's always boring to stay in a sort of status quo, you know. And what I have an impression when people are talking of times now, and also if they don't say what they want and just accept another restriction and still another restriction, still another restriction, they always hope that things get back to normal as they once have been. But actually, I think there are so many things that went wrong already. When I was a student, I was aware of this. So this is a really big chance now. But the thing is also to let go and to go into something new. And I think this is something that we both do, that we are not really afraid of changing things, and that we somehow have this conviction, whatever will come, we will be able to cope with our creativity to use these new situations in a new way that will turn into another chance for us to find out more about ourselves. What do you think?
I mean, I agree with that. That's a large statement that I'll like. I mean, for me, I think when it comes to like how things swing back and forth in the United States, we have usually a 30-year cycle of first it's economic, like you have economic up, and when economics are good in the United States, liberalism is everywhere. And when the economy goes down, things are conservative. And that's kind of like the way it goes between those two things. So when the cycle is moving faster, then you have conservative, liberal, conservative, liberal. And some of that is also reflected in what happens in Germany, is that you have World War I. The economy does very poorly in Germany. They're made to pay back for reparations for the war. The economy does poor, and then conservatism comes, and then you have the rise of Hitlerism. So, we had a big economic downfall in 2008, and across the globe, you have conservatism rises, like dictators rise. And, for us, it's a little different. In the United States, when September 11th happened, we had it's sort of like a shock wave. So once September 11th happened, then you had conservative and liberal, and economic up and economic down was swinging much faster. So it'll probably take us another like 30, 40 years for that swing to start going slower again. And not that America is the center of the world, but it's one part of it, is that these economic and conservative and liberal swings are ripples that affect globally, right? So one part of the country does this, economic shutdown because of a pandemic, starting in another place. It all affects not just the economy, but that directly affects the politics. So I think knowing that, you have to always, like, there's this kind of assumption that things are always in one direction. Things are never in one direction. Things are always a swinging between those two pendulums. This pendulum is always swinging back and forth between those 2 points. So you have to be in mind that like whatever it is today, tomorrow it might be completely different. It might be completely, conservative. It might be the economy might be destroyed, but on the other side, there'll be an upswing. As far as like, the dreams and stuff that you have, like I wonder, like, because I had a lot of like a personal thing where I had, a lot of these dreams that were incredibly violent, and I would wake up multiple times with my heart beating really, really fast. And this would happen every night, all the time. And then one time I talked to this friend of mine who was saying that, yeah, I had those same things happen. And then it turned out that he had sleep apnea, which I'd never heard about. And which basically meant that when he was sleeping, he was choking. And then the choking made his heart rate skyrocket, which then shocked him awake, and he would have these horrible dreams. So I got checked out for that, and it turned out I had it. So then I had a surgery where they cut out the back of my throat thing, so the little dangling thing is gone, and then they opened up my nose, and then I started sleeping better, and then these horrible dreams pretty much went away. But the horrible dreams affected my daily life too, that it made me more aggressive, it made me more angry because I wasn't sleeping. I was tired and cranky and miserable all the time. And then I got the operation, and then all of my friends were like, wow, you're a completely different person. You're like sweet and nice and calm. I still sometimes have these like, very violent dreams, but I think that's more related to like the climate of the world. Like here in New York, I think, like New York City is adapted to dealing with horrible things. So when not just September 11th, like blackouts, crippling blizzards, bad economies, the city really kind of like says, okay, that's what we're dealing with this week. We're going to like try to get through it. So when a lot of people were telling me like, oh, the pandemic is bad in New York. And when I say bad, like, I mean, I don't think people get it outside of New York. It's like my pharmacist died from it. My wife's friend died from it. My artist friends who were in a building, 7 or 8 people died in that same building. People, my uncle and aunt and cousins were all hospitalized for it. So when people say like, oh, it's just like an aggravated flu, and I'm like, look, I've had friends die from the flu. Like, I don't want to like even downplay that. I had several artist friends who had a flu. It turned into pneumonia. They had walking pneumonia. They went to sleep, thought they had a thing, and they just died. So then when people say, oh, it's just like having the flu, and I'm like, dude, the flu is no joke. The flu will kill you. So you have to be ready for that. So, here it's like, I personally had friends die from it far more than you would think of the flu in a short period of time. So when people say like, this is like a normal thing, and I go, I'm sorry, but in New York City, it's like, I go to the park next to a hospital, and you see trailer trucks that are freezers that are filled with dead bodies. That's not a normal thing. That's not a flu. The flu has never caused them to have like 5 trailer trucks filled with dead bodies at the park that I go to that's next to a hospital. So with that, it's like dealing with that in New York City, it's like we're not going to just sit there and go like, okay, let's give up, let's flee. Because I say like, when people are like, leave the city, and a lot of people did, I'm like, there's nowhere else that's going to be better to deal with it. Like, it's just happened. Like, we stay here, we hunker down, the city reacted in the way that it had to, and I'm from somebody who worked in bars a long time. And when people say the economics is bad, I agree. The economics is horrible. And every bar that my friend owned, all of them except for one closed. That's like 6 bars closed. That's hundreds of my friends out of work, still out of work. So economically, yeah, it's terrible. But at the same time, it's like, are you going to sit there and just be like, totally shut down and give up? Like, no, that's not the time to give up. That's the time when you got to think of like internally, like, how can I cope with this? How can I get through this? And how can I like do something that's positive mostly first for myself, and then secondarily for my family, and then third for the community at large. So, for me, outreaching to other people that were isolated, I started doing these interviews called Isolation Nation.
Mhm.
So I was reaching out to artists in other cities and around the world, and we were talking about their artwork mostly. And then we'd end about not about like the pandemic and their like political view or anything, but how they were coping with this moment. Like whether you believe in it or not, if your city is locked down and you have nowhere to go, that's, like that's the thing that you're coping with. So I would focus on like, this is how I'm going to cope with it. How are you going to cope with it? I will learn from you and you will learn from me. And together we'll have better knowledge. And then our interview will be shared. And then people can watch the interview and then they can grasp things about it. They can see how somebody makes their own art, how they relate to the art world, and how they are coping with what's happening currently. So I think like everybody's going to have to deal with it, and like I respect the fact that if you don't can't wear a mask, you shouldn't be forced to wear a mask, because if you can't, like I get that, like feeling claustrophobic is a horrible thing. Um, and I don't want to like say like whatever anybody's political view out there, I always try to stay personally away from that, because I feel like the worst thing I want to do like on social media and all that stuff is sort of like, I mean, like, let's say I'm liberal, obviously. I mean, I think that's clear because of my artwork, but I don't want to discourage people who have different point of views. I like, that's kind of the greatest founding thing of our country. And we have a lot of problems, believe me. We have based on a lot of problems. But at the same time, it's like there used to be a discourse where people would talk, you know what I mean? Instead of like pointing the other way and like totally just disregarding somebody else's opinion. I mean, these are what the internet does is sort of strips away this thing of like each person is an individual, you know what I mean? And you forget that. Whereas if you were in the same room with them, somebody who has a completely opposite point of view is actually still a human being, and they're still probably kind, and they still probably care about people in general. And as I done these films and I travel this country, mostly the United States, and I go to cities that are very conservative, very Republican, and I'm a New York City Jew who makes art, like, that has a wide swath of friends and different things. And they, a film festival put me in a very Republican household with a guy who was a big supporter of the Republican Party. And he was a lovely person, and I really got along with him, and I loved talking with him. But unless you're on the ground doing that, then there's this sort of disconnect of the humanity that exists between all of us, regardless of your political point of view and where you're coming from. And I feel like that's kind of like the downside of like lockdowns and like, lack of travel and all of that, is that this interaction and discourse is left to online. And for me, online is bullshit. Like I don't care about that. Like I get negative, like I'll put out any kind of project, I'll get negative reviews. I'll get great reviews. I get a lot of great reviews. I do pretty well on my reviews, but you're always going to get somebody who just completely hates it for whatever reason. And, coming from a tradition where I'm dyslexic and I was picked on because of the school I went to, for me, it's a quick thing of like, you don't know me. You don't know what I've done. You have no idea who I am. There's no reason that you should attack me. And I guarantee you, and I've had this from reviews of my films, that someone wrote, Ethan is the type of person that if you attacked him online, he would challenge you to a fist fight. And if he caught you, he would mess you up. And that's true. Like if you want to say something, like I will never say something to somebody online, regardless of my opinion of their statement, that's attacking them, unless I would say it to their face. And believe me, I would never write it online. I would go to them and say, if you personally, and it's usually, it have to be, if you personally attack me, I will meet you and we'll talk about it in person. But you should be prepared that if you say that to me, to my face, what's going to happen is going to happen, right? Like, and I mean that in the most violent way. So I will never do that to somebody else, right? I will never attack somebody or write a bad comment or write something nasty based on whatever they write about, because I just don't believe that's like how people treat each other. You have to have this sort of honor and respect for humanity. that if I met you in person and we knew each other and we talked, your negative point of view would probably change. My negative point of view would probably change. We would probably also walk away. Maybe maybe our point of views haven't changed, but we can look at each other and respect each other. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, I teach my daughter, like, internet and reality are two different things. If somebody attacks you online, it means nothing. If they're not willing to say it to you personally, then don't give it any weight. It means zero. You know what I mean? But I guess, like, the other part of your statement is like this climate of, like, you know, it is a dark time, regardless of where you're coming from and your point of view. You know what I mean? It's like, just things in this sort of swing have been pretty dark. And a part of that is also, it's like, maybe it's easier to focus on the dark things that are happening in life. But you also need to spend a little bit of time, like, trying to, like, focus on, like, you know, the beautiful things, like having a conversation with somebody, whether you're in person or not. Like, talk to them online, not like writing, like a conversation through like this. So, you know, I'm sorry that you went through all this kind of like the bad dreams and the
That's no problem.
and
I think this is necessary because it depends on the vocation you are having in life. And my vocation, I think, is because I only accept clients with certain constellations in the horoscope. They always have to be a concentration of Scorpio energy and Aquarius energy. Because Scorpio
I don't know if I fit either of that. I don't think I fit any of that.
Pardon?
I don't think I fit any of that.
Everybody has everything. It's just a matter of whether it's really a strong focus. And I didn't have a look at your horoscope, but actually, from the story, people who have stories like you have, they always have a concentration of Scorpio energy. Yeah, and this doesn't mean that you are Scorpio, because astrology is extremely complex. I studied computer science, so I know what complexity is about. I can think very logical, and astrology is extremely complex, but it's really fascinating because it helps very well what you just said, because when we develop ourselves and we just have our issues and we accept our dark sides. Yeah, and this is, I think, when I read for the very first time a horoscope that was written by the computer and generated by the computer, which is based on the constellations, and then there are text modules behind it, more or less. So you get this ready-made horoscope, which can, from my point of view, is a good impression, but it can, of course, not be compared to what a real astrologer then does when you have a really session with the person, because it's much more complex. But in January, when I read what came out of the computer, yeah, and this is just something generated, so nobody is going to manipulate me and so on. And I just read it and I thought, wow, so there is nothing wrong with me, because whatever I have to cope with, what I think, where I have my confrontations from outside, it's all in it, you know? And this is somehow where you get out of this being a victim, enabling yourself to understand. And that's why I said, actually, I don't understand how somebody can be an astrologer and not believing in reincarnation, because how then could you have this effect that you believe there is an abstract presentation of a person's life without having a higher purpose, how this could, and how the soul booked, so to say, this scenario and this adventure trip Earth as a human being. And as soon as you go into this mindset that your soul booked this life with all this really exciting stuff, I always have the feeling when something strange happens, okay, hidden camera, I just like Truman Story, you know, the film The Truman Story. It's just like I hope I'm really good performing now. What's the next surprise that you're going to present me? And this is what I was told so often, because I did since 2015. I've done about 1,600, 1,700 maybe live videos on Facebook.
Wow, that's a lot.
So I didn't use YouTube so far. I just loaded up some of my Facebook videos now on YouTube, but mostly it's on YouTube, just like I did with you. You know, it was really very, very spontaneous. And so I just think I was very often told in difficult stories, and my life's also full of situations that people would say, wow, and it looks so, they always say it looks so easy how you deal with it, because actually last year, it was, since what passed in between till I moved here to Herford, where I live now, there was a phase I had no more money. Really, no money, no money. I just mean really no money, and there was nothing more to eat. And this is a situation. I have once been an IT consultant, and it was a situation that was really something you wouldn't expect to happen to you. And so it was like, okay, when I left my old life behind, I wanted to solve the karma of my grandparents and of my ancestors. And but I just obviously didn't think the whole issue till the end. But you know, I always found this strength inside myself, because I knew, okay, things will change. Of course, it was a short period, and then some friends sent me some money, and some clients who were really, I have a lot of clients with difficult stories. Otherwise, you don't go to someone, you know, and single mothers and so on. And they give me advice where I can address myself too, for example. And so this is very, I just consider this to be very exciting as well. Of course, on a, you know, a very physical level, it's not fun, but on the other hand, it's interesting. And to say, okay, so I'm living in Germany, I certainly will not die. It's just I couldn't pay my rent anymore, and so on, you know. But generally, I think this is very important, that you have the ability to distance yourself to a certain degree from this identification, what's just happening. For me, it's always that I think, okay, now how can I use this to make something new out of it, you know? And then I always come up in a more like a phoenix. And this is what I'm working with inner persons. And if you have this inner person Scorpio energy, it's like a Mephistopheles. It's like Lucifer, so seducer. It's always transformation, but also dark. There's always this being exposed to power, and you have the feeling, okay, things will develop fine. And if you sign the contract, you will never get into the situation that you have to give your soul away. But then things develop in a sort of way where you really think, shit, it happened. I wouldn't have thought of this, you know, and going very deep into this dark sides. But then on the other hand, when you have this Aquarius side, it's an inner person, it's the jester, just like this person who was telling the truth to the king, the only person who was allowed to say to the king, oh, your majesty is looking shit today, without being beheaded, you know, as somebody who's criticizing. And so, and these two energies, and this jester, this fool, you know, that you also find in tarot cards and so on, this is this not being stuck in anything, being open to go wherever you want to. So just to exactly different energies that, and if you are able to combine them, this is the energy of the phoenix. So you have to fall to ashes, have sort of explore every hell yourself. And then you also know that you're coming up just like the phoenix in a shiny new feathers and everything like this. And I heard so many extreme stories based to this. And it's also why my consultations, I can help people understand what's just going on to transform it. And so I can also, when me with this identification of just being me and being angry, when I don't just say, okay, why I'm angry with a person, let's say the partner or someone who just I didn't like, is if you have, for example, a karmic relationship with someone who once killed you on a battlefield, and you have never seen this person, and there's still something open, and you enter into a room that's crowded with people, and you just have this look, and there is this sort of, and you think, shit, you know. And if you compare the horoscopes, then you can see where the issues are. So of course, I think if you're an astrologer and you're accepting clients, then if you're a good astrologer, you have to check whether there is a karmic issue that stands between you and your customer, because otherwise you can't be a good counselor. Because then this person is playing power games with you. And this is also something, manipulation, some Scorpio sort of thing, you know, but also this deepness the Scorpio has. So I love both energies. Actually, I'm born with it because my mother is Scorpio, my father is Aquarius. So I know what I'm talking about. And I have this really in my horoscope extremely. And to combine it, this gives you an extra strength. But this is also what I think helps to understand that there are different views, but on the other hand, to do what you also say, that you would really fight with your battle suit. And, you know, I've always been fighting for people who are not as powerful as I am. Also in my former, when I was still employed as an IT consultant, we had a merger, the company was bought by Deutsche Telekom, you know, and so on. And I was also in a board where I was based on I was a sales consultant, to taking care that my colleagues of all the company that are just keeping their advantages in their contracts, you know, with the unions and so on. So I was always mixed in all this sort of stuff, but this is so exciting, I think. And I think this is also what helps you to understand and switch and use every situation that's from the first point of view seems to be very difficult, to sort of distance yourself and twist it like a Rubik's cube and find a new perspective. And somehow, just like you said, staying with the Republican person, but then you talk, and I always explain this with the inner persons. There are inner persons in me that can relate with inner persons that you find yourself in yourself. And there are others who would just have a problem, you know, and wouldn't like themselves at all. And this is also the problem when you have a relationship, partners or lovers. When they fall in love, then there are certain inner persons that just, oh, he's so great. And then after a while, the other one's just sitting there and, oh God, he is not so great. Well, we just keep our mouth shut. And then after a while, some years maybe, they say, okay, and then depends what happens. Either they split up or they just arrange themselves again. And I think this is also now going on in society, in every country in the world. And I think this is also the chance or the opportunity we can now use, or what might help the world to develop and move on.
We'll see. You know, it's like there's this thing, I think, that humanity is competing with economic interests that are in opposition to humanity. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is, like, if you look at social media, you know, it's already a proven fact based on like conversations that you witness with our government interviewing the heads of these companies, right? That they make things so highly addictive, and a lot of it is a negative. So like if an algorithm in a computer, you have the science background, is that if the algorithm for a social media is made purely on trying to get you to engage with their social media, the algorithm will quickly figure out that negative engagement is what holds your attention longer. So if then they present to you things that make you upset, and then you're clicking and commenting, and then that is then what's presented more to you, and then you're going down a rabbit hole, and then that is driving your political and everything interest in opposition to that other person based on the algorithms on the social media, right? On YouTube, my daughter right now watching YouTube behind me, they make all these programs so highly targeted and addictive that she, has withdrawal when we take her away from it. So I think it's like, and it's not just in social media. There's a thing also in the news. In the United States, it's said that if it bleeds, it leads, right? And I used to do a thing where I would watch Canadian news, American news, a bunch of different news sources around the world. And you really get this kind of thing, is that American news is very sensational, right? If you're looking at mainstream news, where if you watch Canadian news, it's very calm and relaxing. And then if you watch it like things like here we have PBS, which is the national broadcast. It's a nonprofit, it's not part of the government, and NPR, which is more of like a general news thing where it's like a couple point of views and they're giving you both sides of the story. But the problem is that sensational news, where it's like, let's make them really angry and irate, whatever their point of view is again feeding into that same thing. Is like, we will generate the economic engine by making you upset and angry. So you watch more of this to get more upset and more angry, whether it's general news or social media. And that's not really providing you, it's not providing you factual information, because that's not what the source of the algorithm is looking for. The algorithms are not trying to provide you with information that is factual or helpful, and not emotionally helpful and not physically helpful, right? They're trying to sell you time, and their time is your eyes watching something. So I think it's like this thing that once you separate that, so like when I see people's news feeds and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's trying to push my buttons and I'm not going to engage and I'm going to move on. And then on my social media, I'm only putting out artwork and stuff like that. I don't even want to put my family stuff on that. I don't put personal stuff on there. It's focused on what I'm doing creatively and other people. And I think, like, unfortunately, the world has gravitated towards people always looking at their phone. You know what I mean? Like, it's people obsessed with looking at their phone, which when I walk around, I'm like, man, you're being, you're a dollar bill being handed over to these algorithms for these large corporations, and that you're probably being fed misinformation or information that's not useful. So, I try to recognize that. And again, that's part of that thing of like having real conversations with people. Not saying that like I'm not getting my news and those things from the conversations with people. I'm not getting that. I mean, I have like trusted news sources that over the years, have like decades of trust. And when they, even themselves, like I like a news source, when they find out their information is wrong, they come back and tell you like, we were actually wrong about this and this is why. Like there's a lot, like, so those are the news sources I look for. And those are like, the old style journalism school where they fact check and all that stuff. So that's like, I don't even want to say, that's like PBS or like NPR or like, even the Wall Street Journal, which is a conservative news source here, but is also very thorough. I have it. So like growing up in DC, I have a lot of friends that are journalists. And kind of the way you even see within news sources is that the way the news sources work is that for international news, you have Reuters and you have another one, which is the Associated Press. Both of those are made up of two boards, right? It's like a 12 to 22 member board, depending on the company. News stories are brought to them, and then that board votes on which will go out. Now, anybody who's then saying yes or no is controlling the news that we get. So, on those sources, I'm skeptical, not saying that I don't believe the information is inaccurate. I believe it is accurate, but what they're controlling is what was actually being said, shown to us. So for here in the United States, there was a whole thing like in Haiti, right? In the 90s, there was a military coup and there was a lot of violence. And I had friends who were reporters who were telling me like, hey, we're down here in Haiti and like there's bodies being piled on the street. But when we're sending these stories, these are freelance journalists, when we send in these stories to Reuters and Associated Press, they're going like, yeah, we're not covering that story right now because we don't want to focus the world attention on Haiti. We're focusing on something else. But people are like, hey, the news needs to cover this because people are actually dying. So finally, that becomes part of the news story because all the relatives in Haiti that had relatives in the United States, those relatives started advocating in front of the UN, started going to the embassy, started going and, protesting like, hey, there are people dying here. Then the news started covering it. Then Clinton sends an aircraft carrier down there to try to quell the coup, right? So for me, there's a lot of stuff out there that I'm not saying that it's necessarily like misinformation. It's like the information is controlled that we get. The information, if you're looking at, you have to question what is the generating factor of them giving you information, right? What is the economic engine that keeps this website, that keeps this source alive? So like, I'd rather not watch anything that's a for-profit news source. I'm going to focus on things that are non-profit news sources because that takes it out of the equation. I'm not going to focus on one news source because, I want to have a spectrum of stuff. I'm not going to go to any individual or have a conversation that is giving me my news. And again, with all of this, all of these factors kept in mind, I keep in mind that everybody, including myself, we're all being manipulated by sources that have agendas. And the agendas by all of these sources are usually one thing, and that's economic drivers. So again, it's like, I feel like you have to kind of separate these things that influence, who you are based on that, and keep in mind that you need to be open when you're talking to an individual. And those things are more based on like emotional well-being for you and the other individual. You have to be open-minded to talk to them because you can't really understand where their point of view is coming from because of all the things that possibly could be potentially tainting them, could be infecting them. Doesn't mean that they're still not like a valuable person, that they're not a valuable human to have in your life. You know what I mean? They can still be loving and caring and all of that. So in that in mind, I'm always trying to keep myself open wherever I travel. It's like, the news sources that are being provided to you and myself are tainting your worldview. But by me allowing that tainted worldview to make me like not engage with another person, to me is going like I'm giving that power over to the large social media companies and the large corporations that own news sources, and I'm just not willing to allow, like, to me it's like a failure on my point. You know what I mean? Like, if I can't just like have a civil discourse and like get to know somebody on a personal level and like hear them and try to like, in film audio, it's called like signal to noise ratio. The signal is like the pure audio that you want to hear, the person's voice or the sound. And then the noise is like the background noise. And with social media and news and all of that stuff, we're bombarded with noise. So even when we're talking, we're spewing out that same noise. So I think, like, I don't want to give over that power to another corporation, and I mean like people who are like into like there's this website I go to and like they're giving me all my news and I'm like, Sure they are, because this person is selling advertisers, you know what I mean? Like they're concentrated on making the money that comes in to pay their mortgage. The information they're giving you, like what skin in the game do they have, whether, you know, like how you react in the world? It's nothing. They don't care. So for me, I want to be isolated from all of that and, you know, try to interact with humanity on a human level, as opposed to the noise that's being provided by all the sources out there.
I think this is just a nice sort of final sum up for our spectators now.
I'm sorry for the people who are out there. I talk too much. I apologize for that.
Yeah, two of us, and but I think for me, it's what's really nice is to find someone who is just like, you know, so just being so much in your stuff and carried away. This is what a lot of people have a difficulty to understand. But this is this commitment that one has, and then you are not getting aware of how long you are talking. As I'm not talking to you, but same too with me. So what I really like is that people who normally watch my German videos, they would just say, okay, now we saw that she can also keep her mouth shut and listen to someone else. And yeah, I think it's because I had some ideas what is just for out. We say in German to aus dem Nähkästchen plaudern. So say something that you, some secrets. You know, I just had a lot of ideas what we could talk about, but then I just thought, okay, I with my official Virgo energy of being so much in my brain, I just leave it all away and just leave it all to how things are going to develop. And as I know that you are a very interesting person with so full of creativity and so on, just let happen what happens. And at the end of the whole talk, so to sum it up in a nutshell, it's just exactly what makes us, I think, so strong, is that we don't care so much what people think about ourselves, because it's important what oneself thinks about. When I'm criticized and I did something I really believe in, then it's fine by me. But if I'm criticized because I did something that I didn't believe in to please someone else, and then I'm criticized, then it's not okay for me. You know, you're stupid. You're very stupid to do this. And on the other hand, also to inform yourself really from the source, to get yourself off of social medias, but being also connected, but with a critical mindset, and use your time as well for important stuff and don't waste it. And especially to be open to see that there are so many facets in every person, so many what I call inner persons, that you will always have the ability, the chance, or yeah, it's also a pleasure or a gift to meet someone else and learn and be open, even if it's not your opinion. And this is something we have in Germany as well, as an initiative of some philosophers and so on, that you have this open space, this discussion space where people can really again talk, or something people ask for, that you're not just bashed, but he's this or he's that in this black and white sort of thing. But the world is not black and white, it has the colors of the rainbow. And to come back, that's why we need more unicorns, because actually I would describe myself, if somebody would ask what sort of animal I would be, I would say I'm a mixture of a wild horse and a unicorn. And I think the same is true for you.
I'm a little bit of a unicorn.
But also of a wild horse, you know this.
Probably more of a fox. I'm ready to steal and run away. But I'd say, to your point, it's like there's this thing of like, debate versus conversation. And in a debate is two people having fixed point of views that are not willing to bend. And a conversation is a developing knowledge between two people, and they learn as they continue the conversation.
Mhm.
I don't want debates. I want conversations. That
I
should be
think
the new mantra of the world.
I think there's
No
something
debates, conversations only.
when I just feel that it's very difficult with my point of view and the point of view of another person, and we will not find some sort of common position. Then you have
You
it
can
in
though, but
English.
that's the thing. You can have a common position. It's the common position is not about your fixed positions, but about that conversation about other things in between.
Yeah, and
You
what
know what I
I
mean?
always like is there is this really nice English expression that then helps me out of the mess. That's let's agree to differ. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's okay that somebody else has a different opinion. I respect it. It's okay, but it's not mine. And then we can just have a beer and well, then we will find something else and just change the subject at a certain degree without being, let's say, just only on the surface. But well, this is something that we will not come together. We will not find a sort of compromise. Okay, then it's this way, but still, this is not the devil for me, so to say.
that's like I used to be a bartender, and this was like the mantra that bartenders keep in their head is that conversations in bars between people who don't really know each other should exclude religion, politics, and sports. And if you stay away from those three subjects, generally anybody can talk about, talk and have a good conversation without it turning into an ugly, again, debate. That keeps the conversation from drifting into the debate.
So, Ethan, thank you so much that
Thank
you
you.
gave me your time for this talk. And I hope this is something that will also inspire people to show that two persons, one living in Europe, in Germany, and the other one in New York and the United States, that they could continue talking for some more hours. Meanwhile, we already more than 2 hours, 2.25, I think. So we just, maybe we find another subject that we could continue when things develop, or yeah, I will just.
I'm here for whatever you need.
And I just was inspired also with the ideas that you gave me. I will continue on the animal subjects regarding what they mean, how stories I had, and how people can use this to be more guided to there's my micro, get more in touch with themselves again, because when you connect with nature, then you really connect with yourself. So, and intention is really, energy follows intention, and we are living in the time of quantum physics, and so it depends on us how we perceive reality.
Agreed.
So have a nice day.
It's my virtual handshake.
My hugs to Blue and her creativity, and a big hug to your wife, and enjoy your Saturday. And of course, hugs from us to Landsberg and the Snowdance Film Festival. Just if you're close by, you can visit, and this time they're doing it also online, so you can book a ticket or the festival pass, and you can see all the films they are having this time also online.
Yes, definitely go check out the films.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for me, find me, Ethan Minsker, Instagram, Facebook, find my films.
We just put your links, you just send it to me, and we put it under beneath the video. Then on this video, then they can just connect to your all the stuff you're having, also the films that can be bought on, I think your films are bought on DVD or for downloads and so on certain platforms.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the distributors mostly are not in Europe, but something, I'm sure somebody can see something. I'll send Self-Medicated. I think you can see that from the YouTube movies.
Okay. Thank you very much. And
all right. Goodbye, world.
Goodbye, and have a nice evening. Enjoy your spring equinox.